Why does the ball go in the net? One reason is because you're swinging too horizontal. If you're at the baseline, and let's say a ball about shoulder height, now that's higher than the net, and the racket up at shoulder height, but the racket is vertical, okay? Vertical racket, shoulder high ball. If I swing straight across, watch what happens. See, the ball's going to go in the net. You'd have to hit the ball 200 miles per hour to clear the net. So one thing you've got to remember is that the racket always has to drop down below the contact point. So if this was my contact point, I've got to come down at least 1 foot or 12 inches below the contact point. So now my racket's back, it's not below the ball, I bend my knees. That's why tennis pros are famous for saying that, bend your knees, to get the racket a foot below the ball. Then you're swinging up and the ball leaves your strings ascending. Remember that the ball is always leaving your strings going up. So in order to clear the net, remember, if the ball's going in the net, you have to get the racket 1 foot below the contact point on the backswing. So if we use the white part of the net, the tape here, as our contact point, let's just say this is the contact point. If I bring my racket back, okay, is my racket a foot lower than that contact point right now? No. So that's where I'm going to bend the knees, drop the racket down a foot lower. Racket face, remember, is closed here. Those two words, palm down or you're on number 4 and the racket face is automatically closed. Now you're swinging up, there's your hit, you're vertical, and you just keep going. And that gives you net clearance all the time. Another reason why the ball goes in the net is because you're rolling the forearm. We talked about that earlier. There's an old saying, as the forearm goes, so goes the forehand. That goes for backhand as well if you're using that forearm too much. Really, remember, you want to swing from the shoulder, using that as the hinge, not the wrist and the forearm. You know, there's a common myth in tennis. A lot of players think that, but I see all those guys hitting topspin, don't they go like this? And they come over the ball? But really what's happening is the racket comes back, as we talked about earlier. The racket is closed. Okay, the racket's closed. They haven't opened up. Now here the racket is still closed. Now I'm swinging forward. The racket's still closed. Look at that. It's not open. The racket's still closed. Now you get to the contact, it becomes vertical. Now, the ball is hit, the ball is gone, and you see the player going like this. So you think that he's using his wrist as he hits the ball. But the wrist is never moved back here. It's always closed. They never go like this, trying to come over the top of the ball. That's going to give you real inconsistent play. So remember, use the shoulder as the hinge, not the forearm. I use this racket here to help my students understand what really happens when you hit topspin. It's a brushing up action, and you're actually hitting the equator of the ball. Now the racket again is closed, a foot below the contact point, and you're swinging up. So you're hitting the equator of the ball and brushing up. So there's your contact, and you just keep brushing up. So remember that, it's not a rollover, because if you try and roll, here's what's going to happen. First of all, when you try and roll, you open the face up. Now if you don't get there in time, the ball hits the back fence. If you roll too early, it goes down. If you roll perfect, if your timing's perfect, you'll keep the ball in the court. But remember, you'll never be consistent with this type of swing. You need to really get that swing out of your muscle memory and get a new one into the muscle memory. That's what you need to do. Work on the shoulder as the hinge. Shoulder as the hinge, not the wrist and the forearm. It's the #1 killer of consistency.